we don't rest, we're reinforcing that lie that our worth is in our productivity. And again, when we don't rest, it often reinforces that lie that our worth is in our productivity, that we can't stop, right? That if we rest, we're looked at as weak, we're looked at as lazy, we're looked at we're not strong enough, or we don't have enough ambition, et cetera, et cetera. That's false. That's not it. By no means am I trying to promote laziness or, you know what I mean, half-level work. Not at all, right? It's important to work hard. It's important to push yourself to that next level. But in our pushing, right, at what point do we start to examine ourselves and evaluate the impact that our pushing and our striving and our hard work is having on our body? Rest is not an act of selfishness. Rest is not laziness. It's not only necessary for our bodies to regroup, but it's also biblical. It's spiritual. In a way, it's a way of us showing our obedience to God as well as our trust in Him, right? Trusting in Him and acting in faith that no matter what the circumstances are, I place my faith in God and not in myself. I'm not believing that if I don't get it done, it won't happen. No, I'm also believing that, yes, I do have to work at it, right? But it's not all on me. I have to leave room for faith. What's going on, y'all? Just your boy, Joe Blue. Just want to welcome y'all to another episode of the Black Men Embracing Feelings podcast. Again, it's a space where we advocate for mental health, especially amongst Black men. And today's topic is simply on the topic of rest, right? I was facilitating a group workshop, and we started that workshop off with asking brothers on a scale of 1 to 10. We ask you to simply just rate yourself, right? With 10 being the highest and 0 being the lowest, essentially. Right? Where would you rate yourself in regards to how you feel? And, you know, this question, the purpose of this question is for you to really assess where you are, right? To be honest with yourself. And most of the brothers, you know, sit on the average, they're about, 7, about 6. And one brother said the lowest is about a 5. And with that question, right, we just shared in regards to, what's contributing to that, often feeling overworked, right? Often feeling burnt out, often feeling as if, we're just overwhelmed, with the cares of life, right? Overwhelmed in regards to we have, our families, we have our jobs, as well as just the things that we're doing in the community. It's a lot going on. Essentially, it's a lot going on. And I myself, the right answer, I'm about a 6.5. And that's on a good day. And I started to really reflect on that and asking myself, when was the last time I actually allowed myself to be above that, right? On average, I say I'm about 6.5, 7, right? Lowest being a 5, right? 4.5 to a 5. But when have I allowed myself to go above that? When have I allowed myself to actually feel what an 8, 9, or 10 feels like, right? And that was a question that kind of, was the focus of that group session, to where we really started to focus on the importance of rest, right? We started to focus and emphasize, how much our giving, how much our doing contributes to burnout. And with that, I want to propose this question to you all that are listening, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, being honest with yourself, where would you rate yourself, right? Again, with 10 being the highest, 10 being on cloud 9, and 0, call the cops, right? Because it's a problem. Where would you really rate yourself? And then also asking, how often do you find yourself being there? What contributes to that? What gets in the way of you actually feeling as if you're at a 10, you're at a 9, right? And I'm not saying perfection, right? We always got room for improvement, always have room for growth, right? But when was the last time you actually allowed yourself to experience a 10 feeling of euphoria, of extreme excitement, or even peace, right? Just feeling that peace as if all is well. And then on top of that, I'll ask, when was actually the last time you allowed yourself to rest, right? Like really rest. I'm not just talking about, getting that 8 to 9 hours of sleep type of rest, but just feeling rested within your mind, body, and even your soul, right? Because that's important. It's important that we allow ourselves to regroup. It's important that we allow ourselves to recharge. It's important that we find those moments of peace, find those moments of relaxation, because we do a lot. And over time, our bodies start to wear down. over time, our bodies start to carry so much stress because of what we're doing and how much we're pouring out, right? How are we being poured back into, right? How are we allowing ourselves to recharge, to regroup? And trust me, I get it. I get it. The grind is important. There's a lot of things on our plate. There's a lot of things that need to be done as of yesterday, right? And oftentimes, when I ask that question to another brother of, you know what I mean, what's stopping you from resting? Oftentimes I hear, I don't have time to. And I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of saying I don't have time to rest, right? Because there's so much going on, and it's easy to get so consumed in our responsibilities. It's easy to get so consumed in the cares of life, right? And the stressors of life. But with this episode today, I want to encourage you, right, to pause intentionally, right? To find times to rest intentionally before our body does it for us. And what I mean by that is before our body starts to shut down, right? Before our body starts to give out on us, before our mind starts to give out on us, right? Before our spirit and our faith, right, starts to wear out on us, right? It won't always feel right to rest. It won't always feel like it's the right time to, but it's very necessary and important that we find the time, even create the time, right, to rest. I recall reading a book by Jason Wilson called The Man, the Moment Demands, and it's a great book. So I encourage you to read it. If you haven't to, I myself am listening to it on Audible again because I have a lot of things going on. So that's me trying to find time to still invest in myself. It's a great book in regards to just men's health, overall wellness, identity. It's a powerful book that pours into you. And reading that book, he had a section where he talks about just men taking care of themselves. And one of the things that he stated, it was a quote that he stated that relentless toil devours tranquility. And again, relentless toil devours tranquility. And when giving that statement, he also provided an example that even when he tried to take a nap, simply just take a nap, right? He found himself popping out of his sleep the moment that he heard his wife coming in, right? That's crazy. The moment that he heard his wife coming in, he would jump out of his sleep. And the reason why is because he wanted to avoid that perception of being seen as lazy, right? He found it difficult to take a nap, to get the rest that he needed because of the perception of being seen as lazy, right? And that's relatable to me. And I'm sure that's relatable to a lot of men that's listening, right? How we hesitate to even try and take a break, right? Because we don't want to be seen as lazy. We don't want to be criticized or questioned about, what we've been doing all day. Did we accomplish something? How could you rest when X, Y, and Z has to get done? Or you're such a lazy, fill in the blank. You ain't do nothing with your day. You know what I mean? All you do is play video games. All you do is watch TV, X, Y, and Z, fill in the blank. When most times we really just want to shut our minds off because our mind is so consumed with not only just the task and responsibilities, but then we become consumed with the perceptions and the thoughts that others have about our productivity, right? Which we attach to our identity. So that's something that resonated with me in that book. Again, just also contributing to this topic of rest and just that perception of us, being seen as lazy, right? That ties into this concept of John Henryism, right? And if you haven't heard of it, it's based off the folk tale of John Henry. The concept of John Henryism is used to describe just our responses, right? Especially men, especially Black men's responses to whether it be financial challenges, socioeconomic challenges, racial discrimination, right? It's the belief that no matter the struggle, no matter the challenge, right, our effort and our willpower, right, will get us through, right? That we can outwork racism, that we can outwork stress, that we can outwork the struggle. And just to provide some context into the story of John Henry, right? The story of it goes is that John Henry was a Black man in the 1870s who was hired as a steel driver for the railroad, tasked with hammering a steel drill into rocks to essentially make holes where workers were playing explosives and that would help them construct the railroad, right? It would help them construct the railroad by also breaking through tunnels. And the railroad company that he worked for was like, all right, we have a lot of human labor essentially, but let's utilize some technology, let's utilize some mechanics and things like that, and bring in this automated steel driver, right? And John Henry, being known as the fastest, the strongest, you know what I mean, the hardest worker, most powerful man on the railroad, took this as a challenge. Like, you about to replace me with this? Nah, bro, that's not gonna happen, right? So there was essentially a contest that took place. It was, you know what I mean, if you can beat this steel driver, we'll keep you. You know what I mean? We want to prove that machine is better than man, but John Henry is like, nah, man is better than machine. So bet, you know what I mean? Put your wages in. I got this. Let's make it do what it do. So John Henry had two 10-pound hammers, steel hammers in his hand, right? And the goal was to see who can pound as many drills as possible, the fastest, the strongest, and the longest, right? So John Henry essentially ended up winning. He beat the machine, right? Man versus machine. He beat the machine to show and prove, right, that he can outwork, he can out hustle, he can outdo any competition that comes to him, right? And he was also known for saying, if I can't beat this steam drill down, right, I'll die with a hammer in my hand, right? And that resonates, right? Let me get rich or die trying, right? I don't care what the challenge is. You can't outwork me. You can't out hustle me, right? And of course, again, John Henry won, right? He beat the steam drill, but he also later died because of the exhaustion and the hard work that he did put in, right? And that's the key that we want to talk about here, and with this concept of John Henryism and where it came from. It's the concept that we can outwork whatever is going on, whatever we're going through, whatever we're struggling through, whatever challenge may come our way, right? And although his actions made him a legend, right? But it also came at a deadly cost, right? His mindset was very strong. His mindset was very masculine. And at times it even serves as an example of what grit and determination is like. And trust me, by no means am I trying to promote laziness or, you know what I mean, half level work. Not at all, right? It's important to work hard. It's important to, you know what I mean, push yourself to that next level. But in our pushing, right, at what point do we start to examine ourselves and evaluate the impact that our pushing and our striving and our hard work is having on our body? That's all I'm trying to put out there. I'm not trying to say don't work hard, right? Don't push yourself to that next level. But at what time are we going to be honest with ourselves, right? That yes, mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual toughness is needed. They're necessities in life because life is hard. Rest is important. And that's all I'm trying to put out there is that rest is important. And I'll even use the analogy of working out, being in the gym, right? Exercising. It's actually counterproductive to really try and work out 7 days a week, trying to lift at your max each and every day that you work out, put in that hard work without any rest days. They're trying to work out 7 days a week, you know what I mean, for 1, 2, 3, 4 hours a day is ridiculous, right? It's counterproductive, right? Because the real strength, the real growth in our muscles that comes as we rest. Of course, with proper diet, but also as we rest, right? Because what we're doing to our bodies is that we are intentionally breaking it down. We're intentionally breaking down those muscle fibers so that when they attach and when they grow back stronger. But in order for them to grow back, we have to give them time to rest, right? So it's when we rest, right, that we're able to heal, right, that we're able to gain that strength, right, that we're able to push ourselves to that next level. So as we stay in overdrive and we don't rest, those are the things that contributes to our stress. Those are the things that contributes to our high blood pressure. Those are the things that contribute to heart disease. And these are things that are crucial within the Black community, especially amongst Black men, right? Heart disease is one of the leading causes of death, right? And of course, Black men, we don't go to the doctor, unfortunately, right? Which you have to do better at that. But the more that we overwork ourselves, right? The more that we push ourselves and we don't allow ourselves to rest and we ignore our diet, right? It's counterproductive to our mindsets, our bodies. It contributes to that burnout. It contributes to that depression. It contributes to that anxiety. It contributes to that stress. It even contributes to being emotionally detached from situations, right? When we don't rest, we're reinforcing that lie that our worth is in our productivity. And again, when we don't rest, it often reinforces that lie that our worth is in our productivity, that we can't stop, right? That if we rest, right, it's we looked at as weak, we're looked at as lazy, we looked at we're not strong enough, or we don't have enough ambition, et cetera, et cetera. That's false. That's not it, right? Or we're the provider, we're the strong one, we're the one that has to hold it all together, right? So I'll rest when I die. I rest, like rest is for the weak. Whatever we or whatever excuses we make or we allow society to make and we adapt, we have to change that narrative. It's important that you find time intentionally to rest. And that's where that concept again of John Henryism comes into play, right? Because it praises toughness, right? But it also ignores the toll on our mind, body, and spirit. It feeds our ego, right? And it causes us to hide behind this false shield of bravado masculinity and like, oh, look at me, waking up every day, 4 a.m., you know what I mean? Going to sleep at 12, et cetera, rinse and repeat. I'm the hardest working person out there, right? But you're also stressed out, right? Your blood pressure is skyrocketing. You might be the hardest working person out there, but you're not going to last long, right? The longevity of sustaining that is not realistic. It may work for a period, for a season. And again, that's why I'm saying I'm not trying to promote laziness in any shape, form, or fashion. There are times and it is necessary to persevere, to grit it out, right? But there are times where we need to take a step back and find time to rest so that we can continue to endure, so that we can keep going. And of course, spiritually, biblically, I want to bring in some scripture to this as well. And the Bible definitely talks about rest, right? Even looking at the life of Jesus, he took time to rest, even when it didn't seem most convenient for him to do so, especially to those around him. And we find this in Mark chapter 4, verse 35 through 41, where we find Jesus taking a nap in the midst of the storm, right? And of course, his disciples were dumbfounded by this, and they challenged him by saying, "Yo, don't you care that we perishing? How could you in these times, right, take a nap?" Right? Like that's selfish of you. That's inconsiderate of you. We over here struggling. We over here working hard. We over here racking our brains of how can we keep this boat afloat. But you over here taking a nap. Come on, son. That don't make no sense. Right? That's crazy to me. Right? But only for Jesus to come back and say, but where is your faith? You looking at me, you're doing all of this, but where is your faith? Right? That no matter what storm you're going through, you can rest, right? Knowing that your faith is anchored, right? And that's what Jesus wanted to emphasize. If your faith is anchored, there shouldn't be any storm, challenge, or situation that should rock you off of your boat. Yes, your boat will get rocky at times, right? But it shouldn't knock you off center because your faith is anchored in Jesus Christ, right? So, even when we're challenged by others, maybe your partner, your friends, your family, right? They say, don't you care that the bills are high? You over here just playing a game, or you over here just taking a nap. You know what I mean? You over here not doing anything. What did you do all day? It's like, baby, I'm trying to rest, right? My man's, I'm trying to rest. I'm trying to get my mind together, right? I'm trying to get my body together. I'm trying to find time for me to regroup, right? To work things out, to strategize, but also to make time to pray, right? Also to make time for peace, right? Because if I keep fighting this war in a chaotic mindset, I'm not getting anywhere. It's counterproductive, right? So this is where, we can say like, let's save our strength by worrying less and allowing ourselves to pray more, allowing ourselves to rest more intentionally, right? And again, even Jesus in Matthew 11:28 through 30, right? He says, come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Even looking at David reading Psalms 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He restores my soul. He leads me on the path of righteousness for his name's sake. And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. Right? Because my faith is anchored in him. And even during the toughest times, right? The most challenging times, the most scariest times, right? God still allows me to lie down in green pastures and restores my soul, right? And even looking at Psalms 4, verse 8, David also states, I will both lie down in peace and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. So during those times where things are things are chaotic, right? Where things are hectic around us, be reminded, especially spiritually, that it's biblical for us to rest, right? Like rest is not an act of selfishness, right? Rest is not laziness. It's not only necessary for our bodies to regroup, but it's also biblical. It's spiritual. In a way, it's a way of us showing our obedience to God as well as our trust in Him, right? Trusting in Him and acting in faith that no matter what the circumstances are, I place my faith in God and not in myself. I'm not believing that if I don't get it done, it won't happen. No, I'm also believing that, yes, I do have to work at it, right? But it's not all on me. I have to leave room for faith, right? So the question is, in what ways does our constant grind and struggle leave room for God? Or do we place too much dependence on ourselves? Because if we place too much dependence on ourselves because the circumstances contributes to our anxiety, believing that it has to happen now, right? We're operating out of fear, we're operating out of worry, and then we're operating out of pride, not faith, right? We're not operating out of faith in those moments. So it's important that we take a step back to regroup, to reevaluate. And one of the things, and I want to definitely thank my friend for it, as well, Greg, who was on here, because he mentioned this to me a while ago as well, is that we often take that scripture that God won't put too much on us that we can bear, then we can bear out of context, right? We often quote this, you know what I mean, to help us grit, persevere, et cetera, right? Oh, he won't put too much on you can bear, you can do this, you can handle that, et cetera, X, Y, and Z, right? But that's often taken out of context because that scripture was about temptation, right? That scripture was about lust, right? It wasn't about consistency during hardships, hard work, and perseverance, and that nature alone, right? And then just reading those verses in 12 and 13 of First Corinthians chapter 10, it says, therefore let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you except such as common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it, right? So again, it's not necessarily talking about, how hard you can work. It's more so talking about the temptations when our flesh is tempted, when our mind is tempted, right? When the lust and those things start to try to get the best of us and knock us off course. But what I will put into this, if we are tempted, through our pride, because take heed lest you fall is about pride, right? Because we all can be tempted. Now, if our temptation or pride and our temptation and pride comes for us wanting that notoriety, wanting our names to be, praised and above others. So we want to work this hard for that reward, to be recognized for that title. So everybody can say, oh, look at me, look what I can do. Yes, that's a temptation, right? So that's where we have to find ways to bow out. But again, this is not a scripture to say, oh, yes, you can endure, bear, do all of those things. This is more so a scripture for temptation. And I put that in there so I can reemphasize that it's important that you find rest, right? It's important where you feel as if things are hard. Yes, God will provide a way for you to escape if what you're doing is going to contribute to your ego, to your pride. And that's simply asking for help, right? Because if you know it's too much, why go on it alone? Why do it alone? Why feel like you have, to carry all of these burdens by yourself? You don't have to. It's not biblical for you to do so, right? So that's where we find ways of escape, and that's through ways that we could lean on another brother, right? Ask for help, phone a friend, you know what I mean? Find a professional, whether it's through a therapist or a financial advisor, whatever your circumstances and challenges may be, right? Don't allow The temptation of your ego and pride get in the way, right? Again, you're not less than because you ask for help, right? And also, our value, our worth is not in our productivity. We're more than that. However, our productivity is important, right? But that is not all of your identity. So it's okay to push through sometimes. But again, I encourage you to rest because, again, biblically and spiritually, it draws us closer to God, as He wants us to come to Him, all who labor and heavy laden, and He'll give us that rest. And also, when we're still, right, we're able to hear from God more clearly. For His word says, be still and know that I am God. And that comes from Psalms 46:10. Be still and know that I am God, right? It's okay to find a quiet time, quiet moment so that you can get out of your head, right? So you can quiet those anxious thoughts. Be still, trust in Him. Know that He is God, right? Know that He is the orchestrator, the originator of your faith, right? That all things work to Him and that you can do all things through Him, right? But ask Him for that guidance, ask Him for that way, right? And we have to know where our breaking point is. And that when that additional push that we try to put out there can be more destructive than beneficial. So again, rest is important. You know what I mean? It contributes to that mental clarity, right? It helps us reduce stress. It helps improve our focus. It helps prevent burnout, right? It decreases those symptoms of depression and anxiety, right? It helps our body stay healthy, right? It helps our immune system, right? It's important for our mental, our physical, and even our emotional state, right? Men who rest are able to process their emotions better, right? We're less reactive. We're less explosive. We have more mental clarity. We have more self-control, right? And I remember, just even being in corporate, like that's a extremely stressful place to be in. Even as a therapist, right now, it's an extremely stressful place to be in. And I have to start to incorporate or place intentional breaks in my schedule, for example, right? Because of course we all know meetings can be placed. Everybody wants to talk. Everybody wants to get together about something. I've been in about, 3, 4, 5 meetings throughout the day. That's 3, 4, 5 hours, right? When did I actually allow time for me to do work, right? When did I actually allow time for me, you know what I mean, to even eat lunch, take a break, things of that nature, right? So even if you're in your job, if you can't find time on your schedule just implement or input, a 15-minute break, right? I will block off my schedule when I was in corporate from 8 to 10. And even now as a therapist, right? The hours of 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., I'm not working. I'm allowing myself to wake up. I'm allowing myself to get into my day, right? In the mornings, I try to go to the gym. You know what I mean? I try to just ease, try to make breakfast and try to just have some peace, right? Before I get into the chaos. And I understand that not everybody's job is set up that way. Not everybody has that flexibility. But I encourage you, try to find time intentionally to rest. And again, rest is not just about how many hours of sleep that we get. Yes, 7, 8 hours is important. But this rest that I'm talking about is just opportunities to have peace, to have that mental clarity, to still away and make time for yourself, right? To still away to think, to still away to plan, to still away to strategize, right? Or to still away to have fun, right? To still a way to just not do anything. Give your mind some rest. Give your body some rest, right? So even after work, for example, like if you have to take those 5, 10 minutes in the car to decompress before you put on that husband hat, that boyfriend hat, that dad hat, I encourage you to do so because we don't want to carry the stress that we've, endured, that we've put on in the world and then project that onto our family members, project that onto our loved ones. That's not fair to them, right? And it's not fair and it's not good for us, right? Resting helps improve just our ways to relate to people. You know what I mean? It helps us show up better. Especially as leaders, we have that mental clarity to make decisions. So it's important that we incorporate rest, right? Find that time to go to the gym. Find that time to take a walk. Find that time to just be in good company, right? Limiting those conversations that we have with people that's only want to give us, and talk about more drama, more chaos. It's a lot of things going on in the world. Implement those boundaries and say, look, I want to talk to people and be around people, you know what I mean? That's going to pour into me. right? Because again, that's a strong man, that's a strong friend who is pouring into you, right? Who is checking in on you, who is asking if you're okay, right? Whether it is, again, going to therapy, if that's your only time to really get out your frustrations or what's going on because you can't talk to other people, set that therapist appointment up. Like, that's okay. That's your time, right? And you need that time. You need that time for you so that you can be the best you in the areas where you are needed, right? Where you're asked of, where you're expected to show up in various ways, right? So find time to rest, my brothers, right? Find activities, you know what I mean, that helps give you peace, that helps recharge you, that helps restore you. Do it before our bodies does it for us, right? Just like a car, like you have to do that, maintain that routine maintenance, right? You have to get your regular oil checkups, right? You have to stop and get gas. Essentially, right? You can't go nowhere if your gas tank is on E, right? It's hard to push forward when mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually you're on E. So find that time, find those people, find those activities, those positive activities, healthy activities. Because also, when we're not in our right mind, we're more susceptible to go to our vices more than anything. So, again, brothers, let's engage in healthy habits, right? Let's engage in healthy activities, right? Let's do better in how we take care of ourselves. The grind doesn't stop. The responsibilities, the goals, the dreams, the visions, the things that we're striving for, right? They will always be there, right? But we have to position ourselves, right, to show up more effectively, right? And that's by resting, that's by investing in ourselves, right? So, again, throughout this week, you know what I mean? Schedule an hour, do something for you so that you can keep showing up the best way that you can and in the healthiest way that you can because we need you. Again, I appreciate you tuning in. You know, hopefully something that was said that blesses you, that encourages you, you know what I mean? And that reminds you of how important and how valuable you are for who you are, not just what you do, what you've done, or what you can do, but simply because you are who you are. I believe in you, you know, rooting for you. All right. So be blessed and take care. Until next time.